What do you call comprehensive insight into the ways and purposes of God? What's another name for that? Yeah, well, that was fast. Yeah. Wisdom, yes, very good. Very good. Exactly, wisdom. Yeah, wisdom or godly wisdom. Either definition will work. A comprehensive insight into the ways and purposes of God. As Christians, do we automatically get that just because we accept Christ? Not necessarily. No. No, that is something we actually have to pursue. It's part of our choice. Right? We don't have to become mature. We don't have to grow in wisdom. If we don't, we're at risk. We're at risk of falling into a hole, either because of bad choices we've made in our life, because of moral choices, or falling into some really horrific doctrine, believing things that just aren't true about God. And that is really, really dangerous. Now, some would say, what does it matter what you believe? As long as you believe in God, does it matter that you believe every little detail? I mean, does that matter? Some details don't matter. Some details matter a lot. Some details matter a great deal. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on those because that's another lecture. Now, why do we need comprehensive insight into the ways and purposes of God? Because we need to be able to, look, when it comes to getting, you need to know what the big picture is. What is most important? If we understand the big picture, if we understand what is most important to God, if we understand what our purpose is, then we don't get sidetracked by the little things. And that's going to make a lot more sense to you in a minute. It's important to understand those basics because the universe is not simple. All right, and in order for us to understand what is most important in the universe, that divine revelation, the Bible is really, really important because if we understand what the Bible has to say about God and about His purposes for us, we get an idea as to what the givens are. When you're called to fix a problem, you have things that you intuitively understand, and then you have your givens, and from your givens you come to your conclusion. Do you know what I mean by your givens? If this is true, and this is true, and if this is true, then what does it mean? Okay? And we go to the Bible to understand, okay, as Christians, what should I expect from God? What is actually promised to me? And if I'm going to say that God doesn't exist, or if the God of the Bible is invalid, then how is He invalid? What promise of His does He violate? What did He do? What happened? What didn't happen that was supposed to happen? Or what happened that wasn't supposed to happen? Okay, the givens give me an idea as to what God's overall purposes are. And if we understand the complexities a little bit better, we won't be so easily sidetracked. What I want to do is take a look at a clip of a video from, anybody heard of the Thinking Atheist before? Online, he has a pretty strong web presence. His name is Seth Sprader. He's from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and he grew up in a Christian home, if you will. Both his mother and father went to Bible school. They have master's degrees. His mother wrote, a study guide to a New Testament interpretation book. All right. He went to a Christian college. I think something like Oral Roberts University, something like that. Okay. Graduated, came out, became a radio talk show host. He had a Christian morning program, played Christian music in the morning and so forth. And then, not only did he decide that this Christianity thing isn't for me, but now he works for the other side. He hosts one of the largest atheist websites on the internet called The Thinking Atheist. He's very good at web production. He produces lots of little cartoons that are anti-Christian. Now, what I want to do is present, how did he get started? What turned him from being in the Christian world to the non-Christian world? I mean, not just to the non-Christian world, but to the anti-Christian world. I'm just going to play it, of course, but it takes about a little more than 5 minutes. All right, let me play this video real quick here. Okay, I know there's an on button here somewhere.
And it's funny because when I began to hit my mid-20s, I started to have more and more of a difficult time reconciling the facts and the science and my own senses with what I had been taught as a child, you know? And I began to see...
Sorry to interrupt, but what was the thin edge of the wedge? Because that, to me, it's almost like, atheism's like a vampire. It doesn't come in unless you invite it, you know? I mean, that may not be the best metaphor. It sucks the blood of irrationality out of your soul or something, but that thin edge of the wedge, because a lot of people who are religious will will that away, or will consider that a sin, something to be, it's a temptation from the devil or something. What was that? Do you remember that first thin edge of the wedge that just began to sort of insert itself in your faith and begin to widen it out?
Well, there are probably two or three major things. I say the first thing is that being involved in Christian music and being behind the scenes, it became apparent to me that the artists that I was playing on the radio, these people that I had just idolized, I mean, I remember growing up having their cassettes, albums. For those of you under the age of 15, an album.
Don't worry, for our younger listeners, I will subtitle what that actually means. It's somewhere between 8 tracks and an iPod.
Strange magic, don't try to understand it. But I began meeting these people behind the scenes, my heroes. And I began realizing that their lives were just as screwed up as everybody else's. I mean, many people were battling alcoholism. Several had had affairs and lost their career over it. But the instance that really lit the fire in me was regarding an artist whose name that only people who follow Christian music would probably know. And he's huge in Christian music. His name was Rich Mullins. And he wrote a song that's very popular called Our God is an Awesome God. And he was just near deified in Christian circles. And I remember distinctly the day that I got the word that Rich Mullins had been killed horribly in a car accident. He had been in a Jeep with his buddy and fellow songwriter, and the Jeep had flipped over. Rich Mullins was thrown from the Jeep, and he was hit, as I understand it, by a semi-truck. I mean, just a horrible, brutal death.
That's a closed casket, yeah.
And that night, we went on the air, and we put a big picture of Rich on our Christian radio website, and we said the words, "Welcome home, Rich," as if God had called him home.
Right.
We were saying words of comfort, but I'll tell you, the whole time I was on the air that night, this is in the mid-1900s, this is mid-1990s, I was thinking to myself, this was God's master plan? This was God had his finger on the button. Let's tip Rich Mullins' Jeep over and have him horribly mauled to death by a semi-truck and a nation in mourning. And this just to me seems like chance, like there's no God involvement whatsoever. And it was that night that I began to feel that seed grow in my psyche, and it just got louder and louder over time.
Right.
And then probably after the events of 9/11, I remember I was on the air when it happened. I was doing Christian radio, and everybody I was working for a Clear Channel radio station, and everybody came into my studio because I was the Christian. And they all were in tears and horrified about the attacks of 9/11, and they asked me to pray for them. And I remember the futility of the words that had come out of my mouth during that prayer. The whole time I was thinking, well, how did God allow this to happen to begin with? How is this part of God's master plan? And I began to just start questioning everything after that day, and it came to critical mass a couple of years ago for me.
Okay. So then, what we want to do is take this apart. You see, these are the two things that he said that really got him to thinking, and it really separated him from God, if you will. Now, what I didn't mention was that earlier on that interview when he said, if I wasn't a Christian, nobody was, because I had Christian parents, I went to Christian school, I was a Christian disc jockey, a radio host, okay, whatever, and so forth. And so, therefore, the argument that I wasn't a real Christian is invalid. Okay, so I'll set that up there. What do you think about it? What are some of your thoughts on this? Yeah?
The outward life doesn't necessarily match the inward life.
The outward life, I mean, who you're talking about?
This person that said he was a Christian.
Seth Sprider? Okay, all right. His outward life didn't match his inward life. So what you're calling into question is, was he sincerely a Christian?
No.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Evidently.
All right, and you bring up yes, okay, and I like you use the word evidently. I think that's very important. Anytime you're faced with an argument like this, and somebody's right away think, what is this person's assumptions? Because he's coming to the conclusion that the God of the Bible isn't real. I mean, that's his conclusion. You want to know, what are you concluding here? Okay, and then, what are your assumptions? Evidently, you believe that if you come from a Christian family, that makes you a Christian. Evidently, you believe that if you go to a Christian school, that makes you a Christian. And evidently, you believe that if you're on Christian radio, you are a Christian. Okay? So that's important. Yes, that's very important. Those are some evident. Those assumptions that are evident. Yeah. I think that's very well said. Yeah, I didn't. That's one I hadn't considered that one. But now that you say it, I think that's absolutely right. That all of us go through a period of wrestling, and not just a trial, whereas we go through pain and disappointment and that. No, I'm talking about a crisis of doubt, where we come to that point where we say, is this stuff real or not? If you haven't gotten there, I think pretty much you guys probably have. Okay, but you have to go through that. If your faith is worth a hill of beans, at some point you have to say, why do I believe this? Because there is a cost. Now, one thing that Seth never mentions, and maybe he does in some of his recordings that I haven't heard, I can't say that, but in my experience as a psychiatrist, having dealt with many people who have been through this, because I can't let you listen to them, okay? But he's not the only one that I've encountered who have had this experience. But in every case, as a psychiatrist, when people come to me and they have this, I know them intimately, okay? And I happen to know that at the time of this period, of this crosswords period, when they say, you know what, I don't have the faith of my parents, I thought I was a Christian, but now I'm doubting, I don't believe in Christianity anymore. Is it because that they've looked at the evidence and become convinced because of some scientific data that has come to light? No. It's always, in my experience, it is 100%, it is because A, they met somebody who's not a Christian, B, they have adopted an alternative lifestyle that is not Christian, or, that's pretty much it. Okay, I mean, there is something moral. There is something moral that they want to do, and Christianity is in the way. You see, it's been convenient for years that, you go to church, I've got a peer group, people that accept me no matter what. I have a place. Yeah, this is all fun and games. But then it says, wait a minute, this is going to cost me something I want. Wait a minute, now I need to think, is this really worth it? Is Christianity really worth it? And I am not kidding. 100% of the time, when I'm faced with this in my office, it is not a crisis of intellect. It is a crisis of will. Do I really, why am I obedient to this Bible thing? How do I know for sure Jesus was God? How do I know the Bible is the Word of God? Because, that's in my way right now. It's seriously in my way. Okay? And I need to move him out of the way. So, I don't believe that stuff anymore. What about Buddhism? Does that get in my way? No, hey, so I can still be more, not everybody goes straight to Buddhism, but that does happen. It does happen. It's one of the common outlets, but it does happen. Okay. No. So here's Seth's. What is his premise? If there are several things you want to look at his argument, you want to know, one, what is his premise, or what are his premises? Okay. Two, what are his inferences? Okay. Three, what's his conclusion? And then, 4, is this argument valid? And 5, is this argument sound? Okay, let's go through each one of these. All right? So, does anyone see this, my neat handwriting here? All right. First one. What is his premise, or what are his premises? Because an argument is made up of 2 premises and a conclusion. What are his premises?
God won't allow bad things to happen.
There you go. Yes. If the God of the Bible is real, if he's, like we talked about last time, if he's all-knowing and all-powerful, then he can't be good. Because if he's all-knowing and all-powerful, he will not let bad things happen. He will not let innocent people suffer. Okay? And Rich Mullins was a hero. This guy was deified, according to him. This guy was perfect, the perfect Christian. And here the perfect Christian gets run over by a semi-truck. Where was God when that happened? I mean, for crying out loud. At least give the guy a stroke, Run over by a semi-truck. What are you doing, man? I mean, think about the horror of your Jeep comes up. Come on. Who wants that? Where was God when that happened? A loving God would never allow such a thing to happen. Therefore, God doesn't exist. And 9/11. Okay? We're a Christian nation. We're supposed to be a Christian nation. And if we're a Christian nation, how could people from a non-Christian faith come over here?